So first of all, I do love, so people think that I'm very opposed to all these weird external. I just like to look at them as tools. There's just not the starting point. So I want to talk about these two tools and why and what we see in the program, but also why they are showing, differences in these kids, and why for some families they see gains and then they see regression, and that's actually very heartbreaking. So I want to offer, think of these tools, especially these two that I'm about to talk about, as they're powerhouses that need preparation. And you can't, another way of looking at it, if I was using a metaphor, you can't plant a rainforest in concrete. You might get like one plant that sprouts out magically, the unicorn we'll call it. And that's kind of what we see is the unicorn. Why did that person? Then they tell all their story to everyone. Everybody wants FMT. Everybody wants stem cell, but nobody gets the same result. And so they get really frustrated. So I'm going to break it down for you today so that you can at least make decisions from an informed space. And I'm actually a fan of these. I think that when under the right circumstances, they're performed, if you can swing it and afford it, they can show impact, and there's data behind them. And I do know that they just took stem cell off of the data list for that, but we have seen some of our members that had the foundations down that saw increased improvements at a faster rate because of them. Okay, so FMT is fecal microbiota transplant, literally putting poop from one person to another. They take healthy microbes and they test the microbiome, and then they would put that in a pill form into another individual. I know it sounds gross, but honestly, like, we have never studied poop, and yet it can completely change behaviors, depression, mental illness, because remember that 90% of your fibers from your gut go up to your brain. It's why it's so effective. Okay, so imagine that there is a garden and the soil is dry, compacted, full of weeds, lacking nutrients, and never watered. So think of your child who's drinking juice, potentially. They're eating Cheetos and Doritos for dinner, and they're really struggling. So what is that it kind of represents this, okay, for a lot of the kids starting out. And so you want to help them. And so you drop the seeds in. What would happen? Well, obviously you might see some sprouts, right, for a little while. This is to describe what happens when you do FMT. Okay, so you might see some sprouts once in a while, but if you don't change the soil, those sprouts will also die, right? So you'll see the sprouts, you'll see the gains. They're going to, take place. They're gonna go into the whole large colon, and you are going to see changes. But then the sprout doesn't have food, doesn't have water. The inflammation is still there. So again, that's a little bit of how to describe why regressions can happen after these very expensive procedures. I will also offer that when we're talking specifically about fecal transplants, they literally, if you go to the kings of fecal transplants, I believe he's in Australia, he will not take anyone who doesn't eat a plant diverse diet of over 50 plants per week. And he just says it's not worth it for you. And I guess he's in high enough demand because of the success rate that he knows what he's talking about. He wrote books on it. And he is a little bit like one of those founding fathers. So microbes need food. They need the fibers. They need different fibers from different species, not even just the two kinds. They need fibers from every plant family, from pulses to seeds to all the things. So if your child is only eating 5 safe foods, they're having minor, very minimal plant diversity, you're getting limited polyphenols, so protection for your cells. The incoming microbes, they don't have anything to eat and proliferate and have babies. So we know that it can work, but it needs specific conditions. All right, and then on top of that, I will offer that with our children who are going through all of these systems, I talked about this a little bit with the potty training. You might be seeing a recurrent theme here about the terrain, is that if the detox pathways are clogged, if the gut lining is inflamed, if they're suffering from mitochondrial dysfunction, even the good healing microbes, even if they did have something to eat and proliferate, eventually they will be impacted by this. So not anti-FMT at all. I'm just really a support in biology. Hi, Victoria. Okay, last but not least, stem cell. So this one is huge. If you can afford stem cell, if you really, or you're like really saving up and putting every last dollar towards this, I would offer that. Am I able to? I don't like to. We might partner with a naturopath. We're having a conversation. I don't mind looking at testing, but just the process of getting orders in, having them shipped out, like that is just not something that I have capacity for as of yet. So it's not because I can't order them. It's just because I don't want to ship them out. Some companies will ship out for you, and I have looked into it. Until someone can do that for me, I just won't be able to right now. But it is something that can be, a lot of these places can be self-ordered. If you want, Victoria, I have a link. I can actually, Mosaic, I am registered with Mosaic. What I can do is I can send you the links for what they are, and then you can self-order and I can get the results, if that makes sense. Okay. Like I can put the referral for you, but the process will have to be taken care of on your end. It's just like my full transparency with my time right now, but I'm happy to look at them if you do want to order them. Okay, so for stem cells are like, think of them as the blank Lego blocks. You've got your bin of really fun Lego blocks, and they can become anything. Think of it as like you can build anything. So a stem cell is a virgin cell that normally, if we were babies and we were making these ourselves, right, it would be delegated by our liver to go and become this magical other cell. It will just become that. If we need liver cells, it becomes a liver cell. If it needs a skin cell, then it will become a skin cell. If it needs a neuron, it will become a neuron. But we're going to look at it from a fire standpoint. We're going to use some metaphors. I like these. I like to make it so that everyone can understand. So if the body is a house on fire and you bring a brand new worker, what would happen? Well, the worker, number one, would probably just refuse to walk into smoke. But let's just say they were a somewhat firefighter. They would go in and they would walk into the smoke building. The heat, the inflammation, the oxidative stress, the environment tells that what to do. And his response will be to throw buckets of water and not do the job you told him to, which was become a neuron. He will throw buckets of water on the fire. And that's a little bit of what stem cell does. If there are two ways that stem cells will help us. If, per se, we walked into a burning home, the priority would be to put out the fire. So stem cells, if there is inflammation in the body, its priority will be to put out the inflammation. And so there are some growths that can happen there. And this is another area that families will see progress and then regression if nothing in the foundations has changed. Because again, if the mitochondrial dysfunction was not addressed through a basic lifestyle approach first to keep that inflammation down, then it will just recur. It's the same thing with all the other tools. So you can, if you have a tool that you want to put in here that you're thinking about, such as MRI, laser, neurofeedback, you name them, you can put them down there. They're kind of all in the same category. Oxygen, right? Like oxygen therapy, is that if the inflammation continues, it's really easy to see why we lose those gains. And so, but there's a way for this to work well for us. So so on the other side of that, if we keep trying advanced therapies into unchanged terrain, basically, like that's like the overall message I hope comes across. We actually have to ask, why is the terrain inflamed in the first place? And it's always because of one of these things. Blood sugar is unstable. Entire autism programs are built about metabolic health. We have that. I actually have a specialty in metabolic health. The microbiome is narrow. I have a specialty in gut restoration, so find that. Red light therapy, how does it work to help with sleep and immunity? So red light therapy falls in the same category. So ideally, it's using red lights to access a certain part of the brain. And red light therapy, if you're using like the big one, is a bit different. It's again to reduce inflammation. But if inflammation is continuously going in, if you're not always using it, you will lose the gains. Because that's the idea. If you're using it every day and it's a maintenance thing, you'll get away with it for a while, for actually quite some time, even for some people, if they have done even just a little bit of work. But in the long term, it's a little bit like a Band-Aid approach. It's a symptom supporter, not a root cause supporter. But we have like a member who has bought red light therapy, loves it. And she's a professional. I was mentioning that in my comments too. She's a professional. And she said the same thing. She said, Nat, I know, and the data shows, and like everything I buy, I know works because we did so much work on this early part of our journey, which was rebuilding the terrain. So if your child, like, just to kind of wrap it up, if your child's body is on fire, we don't need to send in new cells. We need to put out the fire. What happens after that, if you were to use stem cell, it actually will allocate it to neurons that need to be strengthened. And that's the thing with autism, is that there's a lot of neural pruning that hasn't happened. There's a lot of filters not built out. There's a lot of some filters that are overly built. And so the brain is requiring lowered inflammation, but increased support for neurotransmitters and also neurons themselves. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, so I'm here to tell you that all of these things and these therapies have a time and a place. They're, in my opinion, known as accelerators. So of course, I tell people, if you have the bandwidth, the finances, go for it. But you do want to start with the foundations first. That's where you're going to hold all of your support. There's no magic pill. There's no magic thing that's going to actually overstep that in the long term. Okay, so any questions that are outside of everything I talked about? Because I talked about stem cells, FMT, biotech interventions. We talked about potty training at length. We talked about picky eating. We talked about nutrients, testing. Anything else that has hit or needs to be brought in? My husband is funny. He's like, I'm running late. I'm like, perfect. So am I. We're supposed to go to the gym together. Any questions? No. Okay. Well, on a scale of 1 to 10, how did you feel about this call? Would you say that it was informational? On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being, I love this call, I want more of them, or lower side, I want different topics, or this one didn't really hit home? Oh, thanks, Jana. That's amazing. I love that. I love our Q&As. Perfect. Oh, you guys are so sweet. I love that. Well, thank you so much. All right. I do want to be very conscious of your time. Oh, what are the nutrients you recommend? All of them. So I think that's a great question though, Fiorella. You may not even know this, but in our program, I often will show like a diagram of just like one of the tryptophan processes, or a process from like morning time until evening time to create melatonin. You need upwards to 10 to 12 different nutrients just for a melatonin conversion process. So it's hard. Like that's why I always tell people, like, when they come in and ask me questions, my goal is to really affirm that diversity is going to be the area where you get the most gains. Now, if you're at the diversity space and you're like, okay, we're eating like all the things, then we can get more targeted. But it's often just that you're not eating the right amount of things for the right body systems in the right amount. And I think back in the day, this was not as necessary. I think when our food may have not been as depleted, and we had not turned and moved our soil, like our nutrient capacity per food is very low. So it is a lot harder, which is why people do sell people on vitamins. And I'm sometimes not opposed to certain vitamins and minerals being taken as a supplemental support to an already amazing diet that's moving in the right direction. But it's a combination of everything. So I hope that helps. Yeah, the processes, even for like the the dopamine pathway, the omega pathway, it's absolutely the Krebs cycle. It's like ridiculous how many nutrients are needed just for like energy production. So that's what we focus on in all of our programs, whether it is our smaller neuro nutrition program or our larger BLA program, is that we just are using food very intentionally. So what about, that's a great question. So what about Ella Ola for picky eaters? So I don't mind Ella Ola. Honestly, So and I look at a lot of supplements for families often. And I was a little like, when I thought I was going to look at this, I was going to be like, oh, here's another like ridiculous B12 supplement that's like over the top, like literally peeing out most of what you're spending. And so I was really happy to see that it wasn't. So for Ella Ola, I still think it's necessary to have like the foundations diet. One thing I will emphasize with supplements, they don't feed the microbiome. They don't feed the microbiome, right? You're only maintaining daily nutrient capacity for just normal function. So what I'll offer is that for children on the spectrum who do not have neurons and neuroreceptor sites built out, you need more of the nutrients, but also of the fibers so that they're working more effectively, because your microbiome delegates what works and it needs food to proliferate. But as far as a supplement goes, I actually don't mind that one. I have a lot of families who come in and I'm like, no, you can just keep it. Honestly, it's fine. Usually what we try to do is reduce it by half once they're in the program for a bit, because you really only need a supplement stack, not a replacement stack or a maintenance stack. Because ideally that's what happens. If you're taking a supplement for your child, they may have to be on it forever if you don't address the rest. And for picky eaters, Samaya, you need to be in our program if you're not there already, because that is absolutely the place where we cover picky eating. The neuronutrition program is built for picky and sensory eaters. We can get them to eat a lot more than you think. And if you're already there, then make sure to go to the calls. Okay, so from that perspective, have a wonderful, wonderful day. Book your call with me. I am the one doing calls right now, so it's not even one of our team members. Very potentially short window. So if some of you would like to have a chat, if one of our programs is for you, absolutely now's the time. And I will chat with you all at the next call that we have, which our next call, just so everyone knows, is next week. And I am doing a completely new masterclass on the milestone method, which is reclaiming lost milestones for your kids. So the full big package of the things that we did for my son in the order, the framework that we use, and I'm sure you guys are all going to love it. Bye, everybody.